Not that I'm saying that you should have an inappropriate relationship, but I'm saying Darrow and Sweeney, if you want the record for book with most plot twists, you can have it. Nobody's gonna take that from you. Hello guys, hello. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys have been well. I know I have. Today we're going to be doing our May recap for the month of May. So essentially this month I read 14 books, so I still haven't beat my high score. I tied with my high score. My high score for a monthly read is 14 books, so we made it to 14 books again. Of those 14 books, I read 7 fantasy, 3 sci-fi, 3 lit fics, and then 1 thriller, horror, mystery type of genre. Of those 14 books, I had 4 5 stars. So I think May was a pretty good month, considering if I had 4 5-star reads. That is a tongue twister, guys. Try and do that 10 times as fast. Try saying that 10 times as fast. All I do want to say is that I really enjoyed the books that I read this month. For the most part. I don't think I had like terrible book reads, but there were on the lower caliber, those books were just okay. Everything else was just phenomenal. So the first book that I read in the month of May was Bloodbound by Ellis Hunter, and the book is actually on the top shelf up there, but I don't have the energy to go and grab it. So I'm just going to talk about what the book was, why I actually gave it a 3.5 out of 5. So not terrible, but not exemplar, right? This was a fantasy book. This was one of the April picks for book of the month. So I actually finished it on the 1st of May. So kind of made the deadline, kind of didn't, but yeah, I gave this a 3.5 out of 5. This was a fantasy book along the tropes of, we had dragons in this book, we had royalty in this book, we had trials in this book, we had enemies to lovers in this book. It's a big tropey book with a lot of popular tropes meshed into the book, but the book did it well. We also had multi-POV. We followed 2 FMCs. Actually, I wrote about this in my notebook. I told you guys that I was collecting notes about the books that I read so my stuff would be more cohesive. So we're following 2 main characters. Their names are Astrid and Skylar. The role of Astrid is she is the heir to one of the kingdoms, which is Arturia, and then Skylar, the other, well, that if I disclose her role, that's kind of a spoiler. So I'm going to disclose the MMC's role. He is the heir to the Vatras throne. So Arturia and Vatras, those are the 2 opposing kingdoms. Vatras, that kingdom, they oversee things such as basically dragons, really just dragons. And then Arturia, which is the realm that Astrid comes from, they oversee magic, witchery, types of stuff like that. So essentially every couple of years, the heirs to the throne must duel each other to battle over this magic entity called the heart, which is supposed to essentially power whichever kingdom it belongs to, whichever heir wins the duel, right? So for the longest time, Vatras has had control over the heart, which allows the kingdom to be magically powered by the heart. They allow them to have electricity, running water, all the things that a kingdom should have, right? So on the other hand, Arturia doesn't have that because they don't have the heart. So their kingdom is very, let's say, impoverished. Yeah, so, and then I did mention that there was enemies to lovers. So obviously we have Astrid and the MMC Zryan, Z-R-Y-A-N. They fall in love, but of course, because it's kind of like forbidden romance, honestly, if they're supposed to duel each other. But then we have a little mishap, and it actually goes to Astrid and Skylar who have to duel each other. And you can probably guess why that Zryan is replaced by Skylar to duel Astrid. So I actually wrote down a little synopsis myself. I said, this is a fanatical world of dragons and witches. 2 lands, Vatra and Arturia, are supplied by the heart, an object containing infinite energy. Every so and so years, the heirs to both kingdoms are forced to duel to the death over dominion of the heart's powers. Amongst these people are blooded and the gifted. Blooded are Vatrans that possess supernatural powers, vice versa for Arturians. Only the royals of Vatra can bind to a dragon on Draka Island. However, all Arturians can be granted a familiar. We follow Astrid, the heir to the Asturian throne, Zryan, the Vatran heir, and Skylar, the orphan, who's in search for her best friend Cam. And towards the end of the book, we have some catastrophic event happen, and Skylar and Astrid get sent to a different realm, or I think it's only Astrid who gets sent to a different realm. So there's a decent cliffhanger for the second book in the series, which I believe I will be picking up to read, because this book was enjoyable. Like, it was, I don't know if it was a debut from these two authors. This is actually like two authors in one. Like, they write the different POVs for the two different characters that they're following, which I found was pretty cool. So it's actually two women writing one story, and I'm guessing that they split it up between the characters. Like, one of the authors was writing about Astrid and the other was writing about Skylar, which I think isn't far-fetched, because I think I could tell like the writing differences in between the POVs. So that was actually my first time seeing something like that, and it was really cool to see. But yes, that was Bloodbound by Ellis Hunter. The next book that I read was Divine Rivals, which is up here somewhere. I don't think you guys can see it. I gave this book a 5-star. I enjoyed it. This is actually my first YA read. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This has been on my TBR since February, and this is actually a book that I picked up from my city's local book crawl. That was like last month? April? It was April. Yeah. And I picked up this book, and all the bookstores that I went to, they were selling like the special edition, and I didn't want special edition because then that's like a $20+ more added onto my fee. So I found one at a more indie bookstore that was actually just selling it the original way. And yeah, this is my first YA read, and I loved it. And basically the premise of this book is that there are two characters. The FMC, her name is Iris Winnow, and the MMC, his name is Roman Kitt, and they are actually rivals at this publishing company. Well, it's kind of like a article, like New York Times essentially, competing for the commissioner called columnist position, which is basically like MVP article writer, MVP journalist essentially. They're rivals. They've been rivals for a little bit now. They kind of have this rivalry, banterous kind of relationship going on, and they have these two magic typewriters. They're called Alouette typewriters, ALOUETTE, and these typewriters have this type of magic. This is a magical world. The magic is not rare. There's actually divine gods also in this world, but these typewriters have the ability to essentially transmute messages between each other. Let's say I have a typewriter and you have a typewriter. If I type a message and leave the letter under my wardrobe, it will send my letter to you, and it will land under your wardrobe, and you can read what I wrote to you. And essentially that's what Iris and Roman have been doing to each other, but they don't know that they're writing to each other. But when they eventually find out, it's just a beautiful tale of rivals to lovers, and it's just so cute. I just feel like YA romance, it's so much pure, and it's like, it's not inherently lustful like some fantasy books are, and I think that was such a breath, just a nice breath of fresh air, and I enjoyed it so much. I just remember running around my room geeking and stuff while I was reading about it. I just had the time of my life reading about this book. I finished it so quickly. I think it took me like 2 days to finish, and in my Goodreads review I said I think I have to start reading more YA. And what initially drew me to this book was the aesthetic and the promise of letter writing, because I think letter writing is one of the most stunning and beautiful ways to convey your real thoughts, because it's like there's no expectations, it's just you and the paper. And especially if you're writing to a loved one, like there's just words that you have in your head are just conveyed way better on paper than it is if you're talking to someone. And that's personally my opinion, but I think being able to write something down instead of saying it to the person that you intend to, it's just way easier to convey your feelings. And that's exactly what happened in this book. The way that Roman and Iris spoke to one another through these letters is something that I will always remember, because it was just professions of love, each letter. And you could see by their sign-offs how it went from yours to with love to like, it was just like, oh my gosh. I loved all the characters. I loved their drives, their motivations, their faults, everything about them. All of them were likable, and it's just like, I don't want anything bad happening to any of you guys. And the plot twist at the end, with the ending and etc., that just threw me for a loop. And I was like, yeah, I have to read the second book, Ruthless Vows, as soon as possible. So I actually did write another synopsis, so I'm going to read that. This is a world that takes on the setting of a London-inspired industrial revolution. We follow Iris Winnow, an 18-year-old journalist, grappling with the fact that her eldest brother is away fighting a war. With her mother riddled with grief and turning to alcohol to drown her sorrows, it appears Winnow's life is not as bright as it had once been. The only thing keeping her afloat is her love for writing and her fiery rivalry with aspiring columnist Roman Kitt. Also, the letters she thought she was sending to her brother were actually being received by none other than Roman Kitt. Amongst the war between two vengeful gods, a happenstance correspondence and romance blossoms between the two. And I think that's a good synopsis. After Divine Rivals, I actually read Dear Monica Lewinsky. This is by Julia Langbin. I gave this a 5-star. I enjoyed this book so much. I don't have it on my person. My friend is actually borrowing it because the synopsis of the book was so intriguing to her as well. This essentially is a tale of a university student who gets into a high-stakes and inappropriate relationship with her professor, and we see her struggle with the fact years after everything has already happened, so much so that she actually prays to the spirit of Monica Lewinsky, the deity Monica Lewinsky, and Monica Lewinsky allows her to go back to the summer where it all happened and to relive the events. And essentially Monica Lewinsky actually wants her to reflect on what she did, and she wants her to understand that it's not her fault, that, well, it kind of is her fault, but it's like things happen and you have to grow from it. It's a matter of, are you able to grow from it? And this book was basically a tale of personal growth, lust, authority, and finding oneself, and honestly, young adulthood, really, young adulthood. So we follow the main character. Her name is Jean. She is the main character who's actually having existential crisis. When we pick up with Jean, she is in her 40s. She's married to a man. I forgot the man's name. Honestly, we don't care. He's only mentioned like 5 times throughout the book. And she just quit her job as a cook. Right now, she works as a translator for the for the court system. So she, for example, if we have a Spanish defendant, she's translating what's going on, typing it up, and whatsoever. Oh, actually, I wrote it down. Relationships. Her husband, his name is Michael, and they are in a stagnant marriage. As with any marriage after year 10. And then we have professor. Her professor's name is David. He was the old professor that she had an affair with. Essentially, she had a little going abroad season. She chose this class. It's like a mixture of architecture and theology. And they went to the France countryside to study old churches and to kind of see how religion was viewed back then, to see how architecture kind of bleeds into the religion of it all. I think this was like just Christianity, Catholicism, and stuff like that. She is attracted to her professor, and I don't blame her. The professor was described to be in his 40s at this point, and she was like freshly 20, 21. And he was like essentially like a fox, like you know, the beekeeping age. And honestly, I don't blame her. You can't tell me that there's not one point where you had a crush on a higher authoritative figure in your life, whether that be a professor, your boss, HR, whatever the hell it's going on. Like, I think this is not an original. This is not an original experience for most women. I think honestly, if you haven't had this experience, then you should go. Not that I'm saying that you should have an inappropriate relationship, but I'm saying that having a crush on a teacher is not like it's not a crazy thing. But yes, so as the time goes on, that they're in this French countryside, Jean decides that she's going to play a character. She's going to be Bad Jean, essentially. She labels herself Bad Jean, and Bad Jean is going to seduce her professor. She's going to do whatever she can to seduce her professor, and she succeeds. And this book was so esoteric. I thought when I was going into this, I thought this was just going to be a lustful read, but it was actually so eye-opening that I walked out of it, finished the book, and I was like, there's no way that I'm not giving this a 5-star. Essentially, this is a 20-year-old girl, and when you were 20, you did not know who you were. And I think that was one of the main themes of this book, was that Jean just needed somebody to tell her who she was. And it might not have seemed like she was looking through that from David, but yeah, David was supposed to be that person to tell her who she was, but instead, David took advantage of her. He saw a young, pretty college girl, and and he was taking out his frustrations with his academia. He was in a little stagnant spot in his academia, and he took that out, his frustrations, on this little girl, and they just had this relationship that was teetering on the edge of, this is not good. Okay, essentially, this is not good. This is not good. And we had the Professor David, he even says, there's a quote in the book where he says, this is not good, you know? And Jean is like, I totally agree, but they just kept doing it because there's just that desire and that inkling of doing something that you know isn't good, but it's like the energy, the need, the desire, the want. It's like, it just overpowers the morality. You have the good angel and you have the devil on your shoulder, and the devil is just a teensy bit louder than the angel on this shoulder. And I wrote something so crazy in this notebook of mine. I said, women are blamed for the lust of men, like Eve being blamed for being banished from Eden. But Adam couldn't say no. Where are his lashings? It's kind of like when a woman says that she is raped, a lot of people will say, what was she wearing? Well, what was she doing? Was she trying to seduce the man? And it's like, bro. And you know, I was just like, wow, like I felt like my brain was exploding when I read this book, because this was really, I think every woman should read this book, honestly. And to use Monica Lewinsky, if you guys don't know the tale of Monica Lewinsky, or you guys living under a shell, but to use Monica Lewinsky as a deity, as a kind of like, not father figure, but leading figure, like this kind of like shepherd for Jean, it was just so clever. And I was just like, dude. I enjoyed this book so much. I'm honestly going to reread it by the end of the year, that's for sure. In no world is a 20-year-old, Jane wanted to present herself as the one who was seducing the professor. And I don't think that's in her. I think that's 50% true, half true. This is a 40-year-old man who's lived 2 lifetimes, 2 lifetimes before Jean. And it's just like, he knew what he was doing, and he was able to flip the script to make it seem like Jean was the main factor into why this relationship of theirs turned physical. And I just thought it was so crazy to observe. But I wrote something so nice in my Goodreads review that I want to just share. I said, I believe what this story was meant to portray is that owning up to what you partook in takes immeasurable strength. Jean should have never wanted her professor, and she should have never thought she could have had him. Because of her adolescence and the way her young brain worked, she found ways to justify her doings, and because David could see this in her, he took advantage of it. They are both at fault, okay? Because he had told her what they were doing wasn't good, but because of his own desire for Jean, he went against what he knew was right, used his authority and his life experience to twist this venture to his advantage, using her for his own amusement, an enigma and an escape to his inner turmoil with his academia. And I said this on my Instagram story. I was telling my friends that I was reading this book, and they're like, why are you reading a book about a teacher and a student? And I was like, bro, there's levels to this. And I said, they would have kept going, they would have kept being physical if they weren't found out. They got caught. That's why they stopped doing all this. I think they would have kept going until one of them called it quits, but they got caught. So that's why it had to end like that. And I think that's the craziest part about it, because, you know, it's like getting caught with your hands in your pants. Like, it's getting caught shoplifting or something like that. You're going to keep doing it unless you get caught. If somebody tells you it's bad. If somebody else out of the party is telling you it's bad, then you're going to be like, oh, okay. If people are seeing this, I don't want people to think this way of me. I'm going to stop. And that was really just what blew my mind, because I was thinking they really wouldn't have stopped. They would have continued doing what they were doing if nobody had caught them. So it was just so crazy to see. I think you guys should read this book. I think it's, especially women, it's just a deep dive into how authority and just lust, and it was just a crazy story. I enjoyed it so much. Okay, the next book that I read for the month of May was Dungeon Crawler Carl, the first book in the series, which is, it's up here somewhere, right here. And I didn't say much for this. I gave it a 4 stars, but on Goodreads, I literally just said funny, period. It was a funny book, and it was just like I said for the Red Rising saga, it was all of my niches combined, because I used to watch a lot of anime where Like the genre is called isekai, but it's a lot of like dungeonry and fighting monsters and leveling up. For example, an anime called Solo Leveling, that's kind of along the lines of what this whole thing is. And just seeing the premise and just seeing how Matt Dinniman was able to bring in aliens and just a whole extraterrestrial world and make it into a game show. And you can see the struggle between wanting to be a comedy and the morality of how fucked up this whole plot is. And I think even as we get into the later books, I've only read 2 of the books so far, but I can already see what Matt Dinniman is trying to set up. And I feel like it's going to be like a revolution type of thing, and you're just going to see like the morality of all of this playing a video game for the entertainment of people around the galaxy, past the galaxy, like the universe essentially. The whole universe is watching these humans from Earth fight to the death essentially, sometimes against each other, sometimes against these monsters that you would have never dreamed of thinking up. Like these are monsters you're seeing in your worst nightmares. If you see some of the stuff that is written in these books, like what the AI, the computer is doing, like basically when you're playing a video game and the AI is saying, you got an achievement, these are some tips you can have, etc., etc. And you just see how satirical it is. It's just like, damn, like if this were to actually happen in real life, I don't think as much games as I play that are similar to the plot of this book, I don't think I'd be able to do it, because it's not only, sure, I'm skilled in such games, but it's just like the mental pressure of having to continue going on. And it's like, what's the point? You can't get your Earth back. At least that's what it's turning out to be, because as you progress down to each level, it just gets harder and harder and harder. And there's not even any record of any person being able to make it to the last floor. They usually stop at floor 12, but that's what's mentioned, floor 9, because the AI, people running the show, give them benefits where it's like, okay, you might not be able to save your planet, but you can carry on as an NPC or a guide or a guild or just any type of NPC that is supposed to guide the next people for the next season, and you won't die, essentially, you're immortal. So it's like, okay, you can't save your planet, but at least I can live on as something else, right? It's just like, do I really want to go through with that? But anyway, speaking of it, the book is just hilarious. I remember just laughing all the time. Like, it was just my type of humor and I loved it so much. But yeah, this was actually really highly recommended on Book Talk, all the type of book spaces, and I can see why. It's very funny. And a lot of people tell you to like hold on until you get up to like the 3rd, 5th book in the series. This series has a lot of books. I don't know why, but I'm gonna read all of them. As if they can just keep coming, I'll read all of them. But you can definitely see where it starts to take a tone shift. I'm already seeing it in book 2. People say it comes around at book 3 or 5, but I'm already seeing it. So yeah, I'm excited to keep reading, but I don't have much to say about Dungeon Crawler Carl. Okay, the next book I read after Dungeon Crawler Carl, read the 2nd book in the ACOTAR series, A Court of Mist and Fury, which is up there. I'm not getting it down, but I gave this a 4.25. I just said that this was a million times better than the first one, so now I understand why people were saying just hold out into the 2nd book. And yeah, I don't really want to talk more about ACOTAR. I just feel like it's just a regular schmegular fantasy book. 4.25 out of 5, that's not terrible. After Court of Mist and Fury, I then went on to read Good Joy, Bad Joy by Mickey Bramer, which is up there. This was one of the May picks for Book of the Month. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5. This is essentially a story about 2 old women. The main character, her name is Joy. She finds out that her lifelong best friend is dealing with terminal cancer, and this just really rocks her world. Essentially, she's a widow. She's already lost her husband. Her daughter lives far away with her grandson, and the grandson is pretty much the only person who visits her, except for her best friend, but now she can't visit because she's terminally ill. But this really just rocks her world, and she decides to change her ways. For the longest time, she's been living as this goody two-shoes. She hasn't really made a name for herself. She never went to college. She just became a housewife, and she felt as if her life was just a page in a book that you flip over, and she wanted her life to be more influential. So, as you know, he says good joy, bad joy. Her best friend was kind of like the bad cop in the relationship. She was always doing these crazy things. She had all these crazy ventures. She was always traveling the world. She had multiple romantic partners, and Joy always thought that her best friend was kind of like out of her mind when she was doing these things. But now that she is reflecting on it and her 80 years of age, she's like, you know what, maybe I should try and live like my best friend. And that's what she kind of does. She doesn't pick up romantic partners. She doesn't travel the world, but she does things like shoplifting, something she would never do before, pulling the fire alarm in the library, something she would never do before. And I thought that was really cute to read. I was like, there's so many lessons to be learned from this book. Like you can't be like, oh, when I turn this age, I'll do this. When I turn this age, I'll do this. Because at the end of the day, you don't know when you're going to die. You don't know when is your last day. So I think this book was kind of telling you to live every day like it's your last day, and to step out of your comfort zone and do new things. And I think that was just a really nice, refreshing thing to read about. And this made me sympathize more with old people, because right now in America, old people aren't really viewed as high as they should be, because a lot of old people are being blamed for why America is the way it is right now, rightfully so. But I think this gave me a little nice perspective, a little change on how I should think about old people, because not all of them are bad. So yes, that was Good Joy, Bad Joy, Mickey Bramer. I read She Who Became the Sun, which is part of the Radiant Empress series. This is by Shelley Parker Chan. I gave this, I think, a 3.5, 3.75, and it is up there somewhere. But this book was essentially about this woman who loses her father and her brother in the span of 2 weeks. Her father are killed by road bandits, and then her brother succumbs to grief, essentially. He dies of a broken heart. And before both of them died, they went to like a shaman who was supposed to tell their fates. She said the main character, we don't even remember her name because she just gives up her name, but her brother, he's destined to be a legend, okay? Zhu Chongba, that's the brother's name. He's destined to be a legend. That's what the shaman says. And when it comes to her, she said, can you tell me my fate? And she says, your fate is nothing. And, you know, after her brother dies, she decides that she's going to take over her brother's destiny. Takes on his name, takes on basically everything. She joins a monastery. She pretends that she's a boy. This is like very Mulan-ish kind of. So yeah, and I think the story is deeper than it is. I think this is low-key like, it's low-key like an LGBTQ story. Like this story was like low-key deeper than it is. It was like a lot of body dysmorphia, a lot of gender dysmorphia, a lot of this and that. And it was lackluster to me. But I did enjoy the themes. Like, and I know this was like deeper than it was. But I didn't really say much for this on Goodreads. I actually didn't say anything at all. I just gave it my 3.5, 3.75 rating and just went on with my day. After I read She Who Became the Sun, I read Lightbringer by Pierce Brown, the latest book in his Red Rising saga. I gave this a 5-star. There's just no other way that I could give this anything less than a 5-star. I actually give this a 6-star. This is my first 6-star ever, guys. This is my first 6-star ever. I love this book. It wasn't a conclusion to the saga. We still have Red God, which should come out next year or so, but it felt like a conclusion to me, essentially, for my reading journey of the saga, because up to this point, for the last month or two, I've been reading the last 6 books and just living in this world. But now it's like I'm taking a break from the world, I'm stepping out of it, and now I can enjoy new things. And, you know, it's sad to part with Darrow and Cassius and Virginia and Severo and Victra and all those characters for now, but we will be back for Red God. But I loved this book. You know, I did a more in-depth of how I felt about this book for my my highest and lowest TBR video that I uploaded a couple days ago, but I don't want to take up too much time talking about Red Rising, because every time I talk about Red Rising for my wrap-ups, they just take way too long. But this was an amazing book. I can see why it has like a 4.7 on Goodreads. This is such a phenomenal book. Pierce Brown really knows what he's doing. Again, I'm going to praise him on how he writes his characters, how he writes their arcs, their developments, all of that, the relationships, everything, because he really is S tier when it comes to that. And And he also is good with recurring themes. Holy moly, death begets death begets death. That is something that will stick with me until the last book, Red God, because I can't see, but I can probably infer what is going to happen in Red God. And if you just think about the themes, if you really deep the themes that Pierce Brown has been plotting in all these books, putting in all these books, I think you can also infer what's going to happen in the last book. So yes, I give this a 6 star, 5 star really, but a 6 star in my heart. But yes, I loved Lightbringer so much. It was such a good book. I then went on to read The Lighthouse at the End of the World, and that is up there. This is something that I read for my highest and lowest TBR, so you guys might have already know my thoughts on that. I gave this a 4 star. I said this was an enjoyable read with funny characters, relationships, and a promising plot, and there's also a big cliffhanger at the end. I think this was not book of the month. This was Barnes & Noble's April pick for their monthly read for fantasy. And this, I don't know how to really explain this book. It was so kooky. I think you should go and pick it up for yourself. I didn't have the highest expectations for this book because this book was rated a 3 star on Goodreads, but I actually managed to give it a 4 star. I actually really enjoyed it, and it's basically set in London, and essentially the main character is able to realm hop. He can hop to alternate dimensions, and take with that what you will, but you can probably infer that a crazy story ensues, and that's exactly what happens. And there's also a good amount of humor in this book. I think I was laughing a lot while I was reading this book, but yeah, I don't want to take up too much time talking about a book that I rarely said much about. After that, I read Homegoing by Ya Guasi, which I actually have right here. I'm going to stack it right here and make sure it stands up. No? Okay, just lean against it. Homegoing by Ya Guasi. I gave this a 4 star. This is essentially a tale of 2 estranged half-sisters. We follow these 2 half-sisters, and we follow their bloodline up to current day. And these 2 half-sisters, one of the sisters, her name is Effia. She marries a white man, and this side of the family, they stay in Ghana. This is a book set in Ghana. It's set around, the beginning of the book is set around the slave trade era. So yeah, we see a lot of tribal wars, and there's some difficult topics of slavery. And then we have the other side of the family. Her name, let me see what actually the names. I don't want to butcher these because this was actually a really serious story. Essie and Effia. Essie, she is actually sold into the slave trade. So her side of the family, they go to America, and we have these 2 opposing sides of the family, and at the end, they actually reconnect, and it's just a beautiful tale of, it's really just homegoing. That's literally what the book is called, and you could just see the generational trauma as it goes on from generation to generation, and I was able to relate to one side of the story, kind of, because for me, I am Nigerian and Cameroonian, but I wasn't born in those countries, but I was born in America. But if you trace back my ancestry, none of my ancestors were sold into the slave trade. So honestly, I'm much like Effia, but I'm also kind of like Essie because I was raised in the States. So there's that culture divide, there's that actual divide between the Atlantic Ocean, between where I am now and where my people are back in Nigeria and Cameroon. But yeah, this was definitely very eye-opening, and I really do love reading stories about Black authors and seeing stuff and being able to relate to it. I think that's really nice, being able to read a story and being able to relate to it. I think that's something that a lot of people cherish when they read books. I know I cherish that, and this book was really nice. I think all my fellow African Americans, Black Americans, you guys should read that book. That is a really eye-opening book. It was really heavy at times, but it was also very gratifying at times as well. So yes, that was Homegoing by Ya Guasi. After Homegoing by Ya Guasi, I read the second book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, Carl's Doomsday Scenario by Matt Dinniman. I gave this a 4 star as well. I said on Goodreads that I'm starting to really get into this world, and yeah, I kind of really spoiled what I was supposed to be saying for this book, and I talked about the first book, but yeah, this is definitely, you can tell the tone shift is coming up, but the humor is still there. The humor is still there, definitely. I laughed just as much as I did for this book and in the first book, and I'm very excited to read the third book. Very excited, actually. I think I can get into that in June, but that's wishful thinking. I have a big packed June coming up, but yes, I really enjoyed that book. 4-star. I really don't know what else to say about it. I kind of said everything that I needed to when I talked about the first book. After Carl's doomsday scenario, I had the pleasure of reading Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole, and I gave this book a 3.5 out of 5. This book, you know, the FMC, her name is DM, she was insufferable. I hated her. I didn't like her. I'm actually talking about this in my Flicker Flip episode. This is going to be my Flicker Flip episode too, so more thoughts will be shared on that. I don't want to spoil everything that I'm reading right now, but she was insufferable. I didn't like her. This book was so tropey. It was like the author chose like popular tropes, put it in a generator, and said, okay, this is what my story's about to be like. It was just so insufferable at times, and there was one problem that I really hated in this story about like the main character's relationship with Henry, which was kind of like her boyfriend, almost fiance kind of thing. And then we have the real MMC, which his name is Prince Luther, and that conflicting love triangle thing going on. And I just hate love triangles. I'm just going to say it. I don't like love triangles, especially when two of the people in the love triangle are already in a relationship and that relationship has to be broken apart just for the actual MMC to get with the FMC. And I said this too, my first Flicker Flip with Akatar, with Tamlin, Farah, and Ryston. Like, I hated that, how that happened and had to go about, because then you have to just commit character suicide to Tamlin or to Henry in this book, just so you can put your actual MMC together with the FMC. And I just think it's lazy and stupid writing. Why even write the other character at all? For conflict, sure, but like, I just think I don't like that way of writing. I really don't like it. But essentially, Spark of the Everflame, I don't know if I wrote it in this one. Spark of the Everflame is basically about this story of, they're basically Fae. It's Fae and humans, and you know, Fae and humans, most times in fantasy books, they don't like each other. And that's exactly what goes on here. But we have a twist that DM is not what she seems. She thinks she's immortal, but essentially she's actually half descended. That's what they call the Fae in this book, descended. And essentially her mother has actually been trying to suppress these powers by giving her this medicine called flame root powder. Well, this flame root powder is actually contraband. Like, it's not supposed to be distributed, and it sure as hell is not supposed to be consumed. So DM stops taking this flame root powder, and we see that her powers slowly start to come back to her. And I honestly don't know what her powers are, whether it's light, healing, fire. Like, it still hasn't really been explained, and I have to read the second book to kind of find that out. But yes, essentially that. And then we have a little forbidden lovers kind of trope with Prince Luther, the MMC, and DM, because they're not of the same race, and it's heavily frowned upon for mortals and the descended to even be in relationships together, let alone have kids. If you have a child, that kid is supposed to be killed alongside the mother. So the mother is usually mortal. But yes, yeah, I really don't have much to say about this book. I didn't enjoy it as much as I did, but I am going to continue because I accidentally bought the third book. If I hadn't bought the third book, then I wouldn't have continued this series, but I don't have the second book. I bought the third book because I thought the third book was the first book. So now I'm in a conundrum that I have to complete this series, and I don't even enjoy it that much. But hopefully, now the cliffhanger that we left off of in the first book, hopefully DM matures, she puts her big girl pants on, and she stops being as insufferable as she was in this first book. So yes. Okay, after Spark of the Everflame, I then went on to read My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. This was my first thriller book, and I did remember, I told myself that if this thriller book did not meet my expectations, that I would never even try to delve into this genre again. And I think this book did not meet my expectations. I gave this book a 3.5. This book had so many twists, so many unnecessary twists. Some twists were really good. I remember each chapter, honestly, I was literally just saying, what? And how many chapters are in this book? There's 70 chapters in this book, give or take. So for me to be saying what every for 70 times reading this book, you can sense that I was kind of an overkill. Some of these twists in these books made the ending of the book sloppy and made the book have a lot of plot holes. Some twists just did not need to be in there, and there was just some instances in this book that did not need to. The romance in this book, honestly, we could have went without it, but I kind of see how it stuck the plot. But this book just had too much plot twists. It was almost getting tiring. I was like, I said in my Goodreads rating, I said, Alice Feeney, if you want the record for book with most plot twists, you can have it. Nobody's gonna take that from you. It was just too much. It was just too much. And a lot of people are saying you need to go into this blind. Guys, I think I need to stop listening to book talk. Y'all be hyping up the most mid books ever. Guys, stop doing that. I'm getting mad at this point. I'm getting pissed off. There's not much that I could say about this book. Essentially, this woman, her name is Eden. Her and her husband, Harrison, they move into this nice house. This house is called the Spyglass. It's a very beautiful mansion, and she's coming back from a run one night, and when she tries to open the door with her key, the key does not work. It's not working in the lock, and she can't unlock her door. So she starts banging on the door, and somebody answers the door, and this woman looks exactly like her. Like, it's a doppelganger, like uncanny resemblance to Eden. And the woman in the house is like, who are you? This is not your house. And Eden called her husband Harrison out. She's like, Harrison, explain to her, I am your wife. And he's like, who are you? So Eden she just spirals, and it's like blah blah blah. And we have to find out like who is the fake and who is the real, and then just crazy twists ensue, and it's not, you keep suspecting one person, but it just turns out to be this whole plot, this whole scheme, and it's just insane. You guys should read. Yes, it's a crazy plot twist. It's a crazy plot twist, but plot twists are just too much. That's not saying that I'm de-influencing you from reading it. I do think it was an enjoyable read at times, but at the end it just got too much. It just got too much for me. So after I read My Husband's Wife, I had the pleasure of reading The Poet Empress by Shen Tao. I gave this book a 5-star. This book was amazing. I think I read it in 2-3 days. This book was not what I thought it was going to be at all. There are some trigger warnings in this book. There's domestic violence, just sexual violence, violence in general, and just some hard themes, but I think Shen Tao was able to do what she could with those themes, and she made such a compelling story. I love the story so much. This was really highly anticipated for me. I think I added this to my TBR in March or April, but I just had to read it. I got this from the indie book crawl my city had it, so I had it for a while now. But I loved this book. Honestly, I've heard so much good things. This booktuber that I watch, Jamie Folk, she loves this book. I follow her on Goodreads. She's actually reread this book, and she's given it such high praise. And I am able to honestly say the same things that she's saying. This book was so good. The characters were so good. Honestly, the main character, such a strong FMC, and I love strong FMCs. She kind of reminded me of Kristen Hanna's character from The Woman, the main character there. I forgot her name. But honestly, just being able to rise up against a system that's inherently against you is something that you're not supposed to succeed in. Just be able to rise up and actually play everybody like a fool. It was so satisfying to see. And honestly, even the MMC, even though he was just terrible for the majority of the book until the end, until we find out why he's actually like that, it was just so tear-jerking and so heartbreaking. And honestly, the doomed siblings trope in this book from both sides, the MMC and the FMC, that's one of my favorite tropes when it comes to like sad tropes. Doomed siblings, like, it'll always get me. It's essentially why I loved Blue Sisters by Coco Malore so much. Doomed siblings is such an interesting trope to me that you can either do it really good or do it really bad, but most of the time it's done really good because it's such an interesting trope, you know. Most of the time it's really always about the romance for people, but think about the relationships between your family and stuff like that. I love family relationships. I think that's one of my favorite tropes, honestly, and this book was able to do it like far better than I ever could have thought it would. And this is her debut novel. This is Shen Tao's debut novel, and she was just able to string a story together that I will honestly remember for a very long time. So Yes, this is The Poet Empress by Chantal. I don't know why I sped through this recap. I'm sorry. I wish I wish this was more cohesive, but I'm a little bit short on time. I have somewhere to be today. But that was everything that I read in May. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. We're actually going to put these books on my bookshelf, so you guys can join me for that. And then I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. I love each and every one of you guys. Have a good day.